Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad. Tehami. On 10th of March this year, the world was taken by surprise as Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to restore the diplomatic ties, and this particular agreement was mediated by China. The top two security officials of the two countries were present on 10th of March while signing this trilateral agreement, with Chinese top diplomat Mr. Wang Yi also present on the occasion. There have been a number of high-level interactions between the two sides ever since. Now, the most important step of the two sides agreed on 10th of March was reopening their embassies and consulates in the respective countries. Iran has officially reopened its embassy in Saudi Arabia, with Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister saying, let me quote him, that the cooperation between the countries is entering a new era, unquote. Now, Saudi Arabia has yet to confirm of opening its embassy in Tehran, but earlier we saw a delegation of the Saudi side visited Iranian capital in April. Also at the same time, we have seen United States Secretary General Mr. Antony Blinken is in Saudi Arabia on his 3-day visit. He held meetings with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and both the sides committed to advance stability, security and prosperity in the Middle Eastern region and beyond. At the same time, in other news, we have seen Iran has unveiled its first hypersonic ballistic missile, and which has been named as Fatah. At the same time, the Iranian president on the unveiling ceremony said, let me quote him, the missile marks a point of sustainable peace and security for the region, unquote. There wasn't a direct comment from the US side on unveiling of this hypersonic ballistic missile by Iran from the US side, but the National Security Council official Mr. John Kirby has said, let me quote him, that Biden administration has been very firm on pushing back on Iran's activities in the region to include the development of improving ballistic missile program, unquote. In today's program, we are going to discuss what sort of positive implications this Saudi-Iran rapprochement will have, and given the fact that the Chinese had taken the leading role as a peace broker in this rapprochement, what sort of a policy the US is going to pursue regarding the Middle East, and what does Iran's testing of the hypersonic ballistic missile mean, especially when we talk about the West? To discuss all this, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Air Marshal retired FARHAT HUSSAIN. He's president at the Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Mr. FARHAT, thank you very much for taking time out. We really appreciate that. And at the same time, on Skype, we are honored to have been joined from Tehran, Iran, by Mr. MOSTAFA KHOSHCHESHM. He's expert Iran affairs, a senior journalist, and has also taught at a number of Iranian universities, including international relations faculty of the Iranian Foreign Ministry. Mr. MOSTAFA KHOSHCHESHM, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Mr. KHOSHCHESHM, let me begin the discussion with you. As the Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister, on the opening of the Iranian embassy in Saudi Arabia, has said that the relations or the cooperation between Iran and Saudi Arabia is entering a new era. How gigantic a step do you think this reopening of the Iranian embassy in Saudi Arabia is? Mr. KHOSHCHESHM, can you hear me, please? Okay, I think we've got a little bit of a problem regarding the connection with Mr. MOSTAFA KHOSHCHESHM. I will try to reconnect with him. Mr. FARHAT, what's your understanding? How gigantic a step do you think is this one when it comes to cooperation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and what future trajectory of relationship do you see?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. As you talked of the two countries and their relationship and the future, this is a very vast subject now when you look at things in it. But let me give you a little bit of background, if you allow me. Traditionally, for the last 40 years, these two countries have been at war, whether proxy war or something. Either it was Iran-Iraq war or Kuwait, one way or the other they were not. So this has been almost 40 years of conflict, one. So this had effects on the two nations, their economies and their relationship, and of course the region. So this aspect needs looked at from three angles. One, the local angle, domestic angle; second, the regional angle; third, the global angle. So let me first talk of the regional, local angle. Locally, I think after 40 years, the region has seen two leaders who are proactive. One, Mr. MBS; second, Mr. Raisi. Look at the changes that, in my view, the mindset or the vision of these two leaders has been one of the factors. Second factor has been the economic conditions of the two countries, the devastation that has taken place in the Middle East, Gulf, and in fact the Muslim world, has a factor to play with these, because they are two power giants in the Muslim country. So this is the second. The third part of it is the people of Iran, who has been facing sanctions for the last 40 years, have been feeling the punch of it. And then you saw the some riots taking place. And similarly, Saudi Arabia getting into wars in Yemen, in Lebanon issue, the Syrian issue, had their effect on the Saudis, and they made them think differently. That's the lead. So I think these 2-3 factors that I mentioned have played a major role in deciding the way forward. I think a major decision that has come within the two states, and of course the other factors are region. Region is in turmoil. You look at anywhere, look at Iran, and one side is Afghanistan in trouble, the other side is the Iraq had problems, Kuwait had problems, Bahrain had problems, Saudi Arabia, and then they are tied on into Yemen, they tied on to, so all these things combined together, I think the leadership of the two countries decided. And then, but the another factor is globally. Globally there is, we in our lifetime of, in last 40 years, if you see 3 distinct phases in the international domain, in the world order. It was Cold War era till the collapse of Soviet Union, and now it was a unipolar world that we thought, the world thought there will be some peace, but it did not come because of the global war on terror. So another turmoil of another 40 for starting September 11. And for the last 10 years, what we see is global realignments. And these realignments are also somewhere around us. For instance, the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States announced in 2011, they're going for realignment. Now these, what are these realignments? Realignments are all about, trying to counter China or hold China.
Mr. FARHAT, I beg your pardon for the interjection. I'll come to you to take your detailed view regarding this global aspect of this rapprochement. Let me go back to Mr. MOSTAFA KHOSHCHESHM. Mr. KHOSHCHESHM, thank you very much for joining in at Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Now, as you would have definitely heard Mr. FARHAT talking about the factors, the primary factors that have led to this particular rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. As the Iranians reopened their embassy in Saudi Arabia, what primary factors do you think, after the soured relations between the two countries for a number of decades, what primary factors led to this particular rapprochement? What sort of a realization was there among the top leadership of the two countries that they thought that this particular resumption and restoration of diplomatic ties between the two countries is the need of the hour?
Hello, and thanks for having me. Well, let me add a few more dimensions to what your other guest said. I agree with him to some extent, and let me add a few more details. Well, there have been multiple reasons why the two sides have started a rapprochement. On the Saudi side, well, there are different reasons for that. The Saudis were part of the U.S. partnership and coalition against Iran for several decades. But all the U.S. animosity and plots against Iran ended up in failure. The last one being last fall, when they, used hybrid warfare in 12 different areas, starting from a psychological operation to provoking unrest and supporting the riotings, as well as cyber attacks, assassinations, sabotage attacks, and so on and so forth. And they failed. Definitely when the Saudis saw that the United States it has failed in all its plans against Iran, they were discouraged, especially 3 years ago when Donald Trump was in office, in his last year in office. He said it very eloquently and publicly that he would not fight a war against Iran for the sake of Saudi Arabia. And he caused a lot of dismay in Riyadh. Therefore, the Saudis realized that they cannot count on the United States much more. This was reinvigorated when the U.S. Retreated or escaped from Afghanistan in a mishmash, in a disorganized way. So everyone came to realize that the U.S. Power is on decline, definitely. And it's no secret. Even American thinkers, intellectuals, philosophers, other European countries, leaders, officials, they all admit that. And then that explains why the Saudis are distancing themselves from part of the United States' strategies in this region. And that explains why the UAE disavowed itself from the coalition of the U.S. Navy in the Persian Gulf, and now they have filed a request to join the drills that Iran is conducting with China and Russia and hopefully Pakistan and many others that have filed requests for that. And soon we would see a joining of the UAE. We would see the UAE joining the coalition of Iran in the Persian Gulf, as has been spoken about very frequently recently. But another reason for the Saudis, in addition to that, was that Iran overpowered the proxy forces that were to destabilize Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq, and Iran's IRGC Quds force, headed by Martyr Lieutenant General, defeated these tens of thousands of these terrorists in the region and established its influence and power in the region. Therefore, you may not exclude such a regional power from your equations, regional equations, and expect any results. Therefore, the Saudis, and before them, the UAE and even Kuwait, who sent back their ambassadors to Iran months ago, they came to realize that it's time for change. Another reason for the Saudis was ensuring and guaranteeing the future of their mega economic projects, like the NAJM city. They want security. They want to ensure and guarantee security of the country. And they know that the first one to talk to is Iran, definitely, if they want to end up the wars around them. And another reason was the transition of power from the Western Hemisphere to the East. It's no secret anymore, at least for the past couple of years, that power is on a transition from the Western civilization to the Eastern civilization, to Russia, China, Iran, the BRICS member of states, to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or what my colleague said, realignment of countries and powers in the region. That's why the Saudis have been filing a request to join the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That explains why the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and even Israel are trying to stay in between in the war in Ukraine. They are not trying to side with either party, and they are trying to keep all the channels open. So in every possible way, the Saudis, especially for their economic interests and for the solution of their security and political problems in the region, especially with the resistant front, they went for this rapprochement. Let me explain the Iranian side also.
Yeah,
Iran also, when President Raisi took office, in his first press conference after winning the election in the first week, he stated that his main agenda for helping Iranian economy is improving foreign trade, including trade with Russia, China, South America, as well as Africa, and especially the regional states, the neighboring states. Now, if you want to increase and enhance foreign trade, you need to de-escalate the tensions with your main regional rival, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has been a rival to Iran, even under the rule of the former Pahlavi regime. When Shah was in power, still Iran and Saudi Arabia found themselves in rivalry in the OPEC and everywhere. Now, Iranians, President Raisi, in his first press conference, when he was asked about the JCPOA, he just gave one sentence, and then immediately he said, I am ready right now, instead of JCPOA or anything else, I'm ready to reopen embassies in Riyadh and Tehran and do a rapprochement with Saudi Arabia. That's highly important for de-escalating the tensions and improving foreign trade. And Iran and Saudi Arabia, especially the Iranian side, they expect this rapprochement to speed up into economic and investment cooperation between the two sides. And it's good to hear that the first Saudi entrepreneur has already come to Iran in order to do investment. This is, a source of hope that soon we would see such, exchanges. That explains why the Iranians sent a high-ranking delegation headed by the Iranian economy minister to Riyadh just a couple of weeks ago, after this expansion of bilateral economic relations. We would hopefully also see unraveling of regional dilemmas that these two have in different regional countries. And the news coming from about Egypt, Jordan, Bahrain, and others is very much, source of hope that this rapprochement is moving ahead in the right direction.
Right, Mr. HUSSAIN, talking specifically about a role of China as a peace mediator and a peace broker, why do you think, what's the understanding across Iran, why this rapprochement was crucial and important for Chinese side?
Well, definitely it's important to China. China has signed 25-year-old strategic cooperation pacts with both Iran and later with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is supplying over 3 million barrels of oil per day to China. And also the Persian Gulf region supplies over 6 to 6.5 million barrels of oil per day to China. So security of energy supplies matters a lot to the Chinese, and they know that Iran is in charge of the Strait of Hormuz, and any tension between the two sides would be detrimental in this aspect to the Chinese and Chinese economy. Also, one of the main routes or sub-routes of the Belt and Road Initiative, or the Silk Road, goes through, Bab al-Mandab and then to Jizan port of Saudi Arabia. And, Jizan is under, a very easy target for the Yemeni troops. So the Chinese want to make sure that this initiative, this road, the sea road route, would not be, damaged in regional rivalries and tensions. But more important than that, probably in political aspects, they found their footstep in the first, one of the top dilemmas and geopolitical problems in West Asia or the Middle East. Chinese were not much present in this part of the world. They didn't know about it until a few years ago. But they were looking for very heavyweight partners in this part. When it comes to energy, they are receiving energy from Saudi Arabia, and they could do a lot of trade with the Saudis. When it comes to both economy, investment, and also security and political issues, Iran is a major heavyweight for the Chinese. So the Chinese could not miss this chance to partner in the solution and settlement of one of the worst problems in this part of the world. They found the foot trace, and they are indebted to both these countries for finding this new role, especially to the Iranians. If you take a look at what the Americans said, not officially, not their spokespersons or White House officials, but the deepest state, but people who who have a great role in the orientations, political orientations and policies and policy makings in Washington, like the FDD chief or President Mark Dubowitz, the president of Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and people like him. He jumped into Twitter to say that this rapprochement has been a triple loss for the United States. Why triple loss? Because a partner, a friend, a close friend of the United States has started a rapprochement with an arch foe of the United States. Well, second loss has been because the U.S. has been absent and not solicited before this rapprochement, and considerations and concerns of Washington have not been, considered. Third, because this rapprochement has been mediated by the greatest rival of the United States, that's China. And China has found a foothold in West Asia, in the Middle East. So this has been a great loss to them. Also, this has been a great loss for the Israelis. Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, both former premiers of Israel, started complaining about the incapability of the Netanyahu government and cabinet. And they were blaming everyone for this rapprochement that has been started between Iran and Saudi Arabia. One main reason is that
I beg your pardon for the interjection over here. I'll have to proceed with the discussion. You've shed light quite in detail on various aspects as far as the Chinese role in this particular rapprochement is concerned, and what sort of irritants were felt by the U.S. authorities. Now, we see U.S. Secretary of State Mr. Antony Blinken is in Saudi Arabia on his 3-day visit. He had held a meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman also. Now, this particular visit, how is it being looked upon by the Iranian authorities, and what sort of aims do you think are associated with this sort of an engagement by the U.S. authorities with the Saudis?
Since the very beginning, we knew that Americans and Israelis would do their best in order to undermine efforts aimed at this rapprochement. There is a major reason for that. There's a strategic reason for that. The Americans are on a decline of power, and everyone knows that. In the meantime, they are involved with two major crises, one being the Ukraine war, that's called the proxy war of the United States against Russia, and also they are increasing tensions in the Taiwan Strait against China, and also they are under strike by Iran in the Middle East. So they cannot go, get involved with all these three major crises right at the same time. And since China is their main economic rival, who would soon be the first top economy of the world, and followed by the ultimate growth in its military and political power and hegemony throughout the world. So that represents, China represents a bigger problem for the Americans. So they meant to, decrease the number of troops and deployment in West Asia, and they have already started that under attack, in strikes like the Ain al-Assad missile strike that Iran did, like the Global Hawk or the Triton, the advanced one that was shut down by Iran a couple of years ago. And then also for their top geopolitical priority, that's China. But they knew that if they leave the region, then there would be a jump for Iran's regional power. So they started an alliance between Israel and the Arab states, headed by Saudi Arabia on the Arab side, under what they call the Abraham Accord, which is not, spoken of these days. It's been probably forgotten by everyone. So they meant to start a coalition against Iran. But after this rapprochement, this now has ended up in a failure. The ties between the Israelis and the Saudis now have, weakened. This doesn't mean that they would cut off all their ties, no. But definitely the speed of, normalization of ties between Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia and Israel, would go down and would decrease definitely. And that's why Netanyahu has requested the MBS to visit Saudi Arabia twice, and he was rejected. He received the rejection from the Saudi side. This is highly important. Then they planned that the Americans and the Israelis had for Iran has now ended up in failure. And Blinken knows that pretty well. and the White House officials and the Washington officials definitely are doing their best in order not to stay behind in this rapprochement. I mean, they are trying to, provoke, encourage, or force the Saudis to normalize ties with Israel as they are doing their rapprochement with Iran in order to bring it into balance. If not, if they have lost the game, at least they would not lose it completely.
Right. One last question, a quick comment, Mr. HUSSAIN, regarding the testing of hypersonic ballistic missile by Iran. We know the indirect talks with the Biden administration are stalled since September last year. Don't you think after the testing of this hypersonic ballistic missile, the chances of any revival of the talks or the revival of the JCPOA with the West are going to decrease substantially?
Well, the JCPOA talks stalled 7-8 months ago. In last September, we had the last round of talks. Americans insist on their positions. They do not want to comply with the terms of the JCPOA. There's a small part of the sanctions that they defy removing, and the talks have stayed at that point. So they started, whenever Americans come up with, such situation against Iran, they go for hybrid warfare in 12 areas to 14 areas that I just earlier explained. And Iran has learned how to defend itself in this, hybrid warfare against the United States. But not everything is defending yourself and diffusing enemies' hostile moves. You may also have your own battleground or playground that you define. That is to say, when you are the target of the opposite side hybrid warfare, you also have power components like the missile industry, like drone industry,
right,
like nuclear industry that you could pressure the opposite side. So we did that. Let me add one more point here, that these missiles are meant to deter Israeli-American threats, so they contribute to Iran's deterrence power. So it's a means of ensuring regional stability and peace. And to end up this probably conversation,
these missiles are meant to ensure the regional stability, security. Mr. MOSTAFA KHOSHCHESHM, I really see your partner for the interjection over here. You are joining us from Tehran, expert in Iran affairs, and also been teaching at various Iranian universities, including International Relations Faculty of Iranian Foreign Ministry. We were really honored to have you on board today to discuss this very important issue. We are honored to have been joined by another participant in the show, by Mr. NAJM SAQIB. Later on, we'll try to connect to Mr. NAJM SAQIB also. Now, coming back to you, Mr. FARHAT, this particular testing of hypersonic ballistic missile by Iran happens to be the first ever for them. Don't you think the chances, if there were any, for the revival of the JCPOA, the chances have considerably reduced after this?
Yes, testing of the hypersonic missile. Hypersonic is a new technology, and it actually, when you talk of the hypersonic speeds, it reduces the reaction of the defenders. Therefore, it adds to what the West has been saying in addition to the pact that they had. The nuclear pact or JCPOA is basically had been in Iran's effort to revitalize its economy. That is total Iranian objective. The objective of the West and then Israel had been to counter their nuclear program. So they reached something in 2015, but didn't last for long, because they thought Donald Trump was the only factor in this, that he thought they need to checkmate something else, the missile program also, which the Iranians are not ready to talk. So there is a disconnect for the last 7-8 months. There is no talk, and then probably since Iranians have found other ways of realignment, China, Russia, and all that, so economic revival is some bit of hopes are there. So they get a strength in that, negotiation strength in that field. On the military side or the missile side threat, yes, probably presently there has been no harsh reaction, but I think the Israelis and the US would come with some counter to this, it would affect the talks if there was any chance, which is already diminished because of the regional and the international realignments taking place. So I think it will have an effect, but not very significant as far as the JPC is concerned.
Right. I'll come back to you to discuss a little further regarding what sort of irritation the US authorities are feeling because of the Chinese increased role as a peace broker. We're honored to have been joined by another participant, by Mr. NAJM SAQIB, his former ambassador. Mr. NAJM SAQIB, thank you very much for joining in at Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Now, after the historic agreement to restore the diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, brokered of course by China, and now a gigantic step, the reopening of Iranian embassy in Saudi Arabia. Where do you see the future trajectory of this bilateral relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia after the reopening of this embassy in particular?
Thank you very much. To me, there are four factors which need to be, factored in as such if you are talking about the détente between KSA and Iran for the region, for themselves, and for the world at large. Number one is that the need to address regional issues has been, overwhelmed and has been considered as more important than the bilateral aspect. For instance, for the last 7 years, there was no diplomatic contact between the two countries, but now they have decided that regional security matters and economic and trade matters are more important than their bilateral angle. So let's forget about it. And it's a very, very healthy situation as far as the entire Middle Eastern region is concerned, which has got some ripple effects on the world at large also. Secondly, the concerns that China has emerged as, larger than life peacemaker. It was obvious when the presidents of the United States and China, they visited this area and they got that response from particularly Saudi Arabia and UAE. And it was clearly, it was so obvious and clear that the tilt of these Middle Eastern powers, especially the GCC countries, is towards China, not the United States. Hence, this recent visit of Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, to Saudi Arabia. The third angle is the commonalities of enemies and the common objectives. For instance, Saudi Arabia and Iran, if they get together, Iran and Saudi Arabia, if they get together, Israel is alarmed. And that is the second tier of objectives which Antony Blinken might be having in his mind. The third is that if you see the last 3 presidents of the United States of America, they would like to withdraw from this area because of various reasons. Now, under Joe Biden, we have seen that there is some additional or some extra concern has been shown about this area, hence his visit to the region itself. Now, all these factors, if you combine them, so we have certain summations. For instance, number one, this is good for the region. Number two, Yemen war and other areas where Saudi Arabia and Iran were at loggerheads, we are going to see some peaceful, situations emerging. Number three, that the mega projects that are undergoing, are going on, or they have to go on very soon, they will be completed, much faster than it used to be. Last but not the least, that the OIC, the 56-member, this important forum for Muslims, what used to happen was that if Saudi Arabia and Iran, they are, of course, members there, when they talk about anything, just because they are not talking to each other, there was a, kind of intangible rift, between them. and the atmosphere was not that cordial and congenial and, amicable. Now that Saudi Arabia and Iran have got together, this forum, OIC, is going to be reinvigorated. Now, talking about the security aspect, quickly, I must say that after the withdrawal of US and NATO forces from Afghanistan, the Middle Eastern countries, particularly GCC countries, and in particular UAE and Saudi Arabia, they were a little apprehensive that, God forbid, if something happens, like, for instance, the some internal security issue or some outside aggression, who is going to be with them? So this particular concern has also been addressed in this rapprochement or détente. So to me, if you look at it from Pakistan angle, it is all very good. The situation is good for Pakistan, the situation is good for Muslim Ummah, and the situation is in particular good and hopeful for the regional powers, particularly the Muslim countries.
Right, your point is well taken, Mr. Najm SAQIB. Please stay with us. We are honored to have been joined by another participant on the phone line from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Mr. FAHEEM AL-HAMID. He is Arab journalist and strategist. Mr. FAHEEM AL-HAMID, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. Now, we have seen that in a major step after the agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia to restore their diplomatic relations, the Iranian embassy in Saudi Arabia has been officially open. Now, what are the plans as per the Saudi authorities? When do they intend to reopen their embassy in Tehran?
Well, thank you very much for having me with you in the PTV world. In fact, when Saudi Arabia has resumed its relationship with Iran, there was a roadmap to finalize. And this roadmap starts from the signing of the agreement, and it will go on till the reopening of the embassy, which took place yesterday. So the plan of action, which has been agreed upon the two parties or two countries, is going on very smoothly, with both countries respecting and abiding by the agreement which was broke by the Chinese friends. So Hajis, Iranian Hajis are full-fledged in Saudi Arabia. Aviation is going on, so trade exchange, trade delegation, everything now is on track. And I believe that, the agreement is going on the right direction, with a win-win position to both countries and the peaceful situation for the region.
Right, Mr. Al-Hamid, where do you see the future trajectory of this bilateral relationship, given the fact that the Chinese mediated this particular peace agreement between the two sides? What sort of dividends for both the countries, in particular Iran and Saudi Arabia, lie ahead? And what sort of positive implications do you see this particular rapprochement would have on the region at large?
Yeah. In fact, we are not expecting. In fact, we had concrete action taking place on the ground as a result of resumption of the Iranian-Saudi relationship. We have seen how escalation has been completely, reduced in the region. Syria is back to the Arab League. Talks are going on with Yemeni's faction. And, Iraq is cooling down. Lebanese, we are expecting a certain solution for the vacuum of the presidency. So we are not expecting, brother. We are having something on the ground. You can see how our crown prince has managed to zeroing the crisis in the region. And we are moving now towards how to move with the roadmap to have a political solution in Iran. Political solution in Yemen instead of war, political solution in Lebanon, and so on, brother.
Right, Mr. Al-Hamid, we have seen United States Secretary General Mr. Antony Blinken is in Saudi Arabia on his 3-day visit. He held meeting with Saudi Crown Prince, His Excellency Mohammed bin Salman. What has transpired in that particular meeting? Both the sides, as per media reports, have committed for security and stability and prosperity in the Middle Eastern region and beyond.
Let me tell you, this is what the outcome has come in the Saudi press agency. What was my understanding that United States has felt its isolation in this part of the world because they have left this part of the world without finding any solution. Now they have figured out their mistake, and they are coming back to the decision-making capital and to Saudi Arabia to walk the walk again. And as you know, Saudi Arabia is very much open. In Saudi Arabia, when they went to East, they did not forget the West. Saudi Arabia is very, has very historical relation with the United States. But we need to have this relation now as per neck to neck. We don't want dictation or hegemony. We need to resolve our own issues by ourselves.
Right, your point is well taken. Mr. FAHEEM Al-HAMID, Arab journalist and strategist, joining us on the phone line from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. We really appreciate you being with us on Views on News Tonight. We really Mr. FARHAT, as you've heard Mr. FAHEEM Al-HAMID categorically saying that the Saudi side remains to be very open. Now, they also realized that the US felt isolated in this particular region, and they don't want hegemony and dictation from the US, and they want to resolve their issues by themselves. What does that signify?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yes, both the points are valid. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. US hegemony. Actually, if there are countries that have been dejected or feel left out at this time out of this scenario, because the rapprochement are 3. Israel, who had always benefited from Iran Saudi tensions. India, because of their interest in the Middle East and the participation that they had in the war in this area in terms of hybrid war, in terrorism, and again in Afghanistan, and the setback for them. And the US, of course, at the global level, they had an influence in the Middle East, and they were the driving force behind all the policies that came out. Now that's probably not there. However, like our friend from Saudi Arabia said, any vibrant, any forward-looking country would like to have its options open. While the Saudis have opened up with the Chinese and accepted their position in the world order, they would not close their doors from the United States. They would like to have that relationship, and that should be done by any vibrant, forward-looking, and I think MBS is a very forward-looking leader. He has proved his credentials also in a very short time. The reforming the Saudi Arabia, looking forward to beyond the petrol diplomacy, looking forward to investment now. He is looking at the economy not in trade only, but in form of investment in wider field and diversifying field. So therefore, they would like to be friendly with the superpower. There is no doubt. While it's also a fact that the United States is a sliding down superpower. Look at the economic figures. They were very high 20 years back in the world economy, maybe 50% of this. Now the percentage has gone down reasonably. So that is what the Chinese are a rising economy. So so it's a win-win situation for Saudi Arabia. I don't think they have lost anything.
So what's your understanding of this particular perspective of the American side? We see a United States Secretary of State is there in Saudi Arabia. He spoke a couple of days before at the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee also, where he termed the normalization, promotion of the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel the real national security matter for the United States.
Yeah. Actually, like I said in the beginning, United States has gone in the last, what, 5-7 years for realignment of the world order. They've a part of this, you must have heard this I2U2 in the Middle East. Israel, India, the two I's, United States and UAE for. Now this was a setup that and Saudi Arabia is not part of this setup, but Saudi Arabia has its influence through UAE. So Saudi Arabia would continue to be major player in the Middle East, and the United States would continue to be, I think what the previous government in the United States and they have probably realized their mistakes. One, that when Donald Trump says, Saudi Arabia is 1 week, if you don't look, hold the shoulder, they will not be there on the. So that's and it was said to MBS. I think he took it very seriously, and then he went for a rapprochement. Second was this Khashoggi issue and the issue that died in Donald Trump's time, and Mr. Biden raised it right in the first. So I think these 2-3 incidents did give a call to Saudi Arabia. There is need to be another dimension to the diplomatic side.
Mr. Najm SAQIB, what's your understanding when we talk about Mr. Antony Blinken's address at the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee calling the promotion of normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia the real national security issue for the United States? This is the first time ever, perhaps, if I am correct on this, that he has used, any American official has used it in terms of being a real national security issue for the Americans. Do you think if it happens to be the real national security issue for the Americans, there is going to be any sort of flexibility when we talk about the Saudi side, given the fact you would have definitely heard Mr. FAHEEM AL-HAMID saying that the US has realized it was isolated, it can't dictate us, and we can resolve our issues by our own selves?
Look, if anybody thinks that China, if it is playing a role in Middle East in bringing some, erstwhile angry friends together, means that the United States of America is being isolated, I would like to, register my reservations. We need to see the ground realities also. Even China is depending on the United States of America in certain aspects. So I don't think that if China is playing a role in Middle East or anywhere else, that means that the United States is isolated. Yes, but there is a degree of isolation which has been felt, particularly in the last 2 years or so. And that is why we saw the President of United States of America visiting the, important countries of the Middle East, basically focusing on Israel's safety, the energy, reserves in Saudi Arabia and other GCC countries, and of course the strategic importance of this region overall. As far as bilateral relations are concerned, America and Saudi Arabia, America and UAE, America and Kuwait, etc., there is no dent on that. So I would, like to think that this particular visit by Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States of America, is just to apprehend, it's just to see what is the pulse of these countries, particularly the KSA, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, after the détente between KSA and Iran. Number two, what is the future course of action as far as the economic, strategic, and security concerns of GCC, particularly Saudi Arabia, is concerned. Last but not least is that America would like to tell them, the Saudis and other Muslim countries, and of course Israel, that America has not gone out of this region. It is there. This is an impression that America is out of, Middle East, which has been created let's say for the
point
last
is taken. Mr. Najm Saqi, I really seek your pardon for interjection over here. I'll have to end the show over here. We are unfortunately short of time. Mr. Najm Saqi joining us on Skype, a former ambassador. Thank you very much for being with us. In the studio, we were joined by Mr. Air Marshal Retired FARHAT HUSSAIN, President at Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Mr. FARHAT, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves and thank you for watching.